Good morning, Cary. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very, very well. And yourself?
On thing. Let's give this a try again.
It's
Dr.
working.
Quinn, there you are. Good
Okay.
morning.
Hello
Hello
again.
again. Hello. Do you know, today while I speak with you, I have brother Asif Fili with me in studio. He's our sound engineer, and he's been teaching me how to use these little buttons and these little
Oh,
sliders and things. And hi, there you go.
hello.
So yeah, it's awesome. It's quite a little learning curve for me. So if you see me rushing around to the side, pushing a button, you'll know why.
I just,
And speaking of,
oh,
everything gets easier when you know how.
exactly. And I'm just so excited to be with you in studio. So
Yes, you
I
are.
understand that this also worked. So it's obviously
How,
learning for everyone. Technology is becoming our friend.
absolutely. Now you know I've got these corny jokes all the time. Hey, so whenever you join, you get one of them. And you know what? Where else are we going to do corn except on a gardening show, right?
Too true.
Yes. So why can't the flower ride his bike? That's your joke. Why can't the flower ride his bike?
Oh no, are you asking me? Hopefully you're asking the
Yes.
audience. I'm terrible at these corny jokes.
Oh,
Also,
because he lost his pedals.
oh my goodness gracious.
Oh, the dad jokes, the corn. I love it. I absolutely love it. A little bit of silliness for the kids out there in us. And speaking of the kids in us, you know, Carrie, how was it for you? Did your grandparents grow food and your parents grow food? Or was this something that you fell in love with?
Actually, I think it did start more with my gran, but she was a weeder. So they had a beautiful garden and we had a most magnificent avo tree. And so we used to get avos from them all the time. But she
Okay.
just used to love weeding. It was her,
Mm.
I think because the garden was so immaculate, it was her pastime, her piece in the garden. And so that to me was really, really special. And then the bug must have bitten for my mum and dad because my mum studied botany. And then, she started growing when I was born and they opened their first nursery. And then my dad saw how much my mum was loving it. And so he came into the business as well. And now it's a whole family affair. But
Yes.
as I said, it definitely came from the avo tree that my grandparents had I want to say not even their big home, in a small home on a relatively small property, but they
Yeah.
fed the neighborhood with avos. And
Isn't
so
that wonderful?
months now, to think.
Isn't that wonderful? We really do learn from the people, in our lives, the people from the past. And as you speak, I remember myself, there was a time when we moved to Portugal for a stint, and what we had, my grandmother had a lemon tree. And I will never forget, I was 9 years old at the time, and my parents had bought this house that my grandmother was in, and we'd just gone to see the house. There was this lemon tree, which eventually became her lemon tree. Anyway, windows open, laying, having a siesta, and the smell of lemons flooding the room. And it was just the most amazing experience for me. And so, yes, kids nowadays, with all of the technology, sometimes they miss out on it. We've got a message coming in from one of our listeners. So let's just take this message quickly, Carrie, before we continue. She says, Salams, Rabia, bubbly as ever, in that part of the year where Dania is in big demand. So we're talking coriander. How can we get quick results by planting coriander, Dania? The heat, does it allow good results? Please advise. So I'm going to throw that question right at you.
Okay.
Coriander.
Coriander is actually a fascinating crop because you would need to actually plant it every 3 months. So if you were
Mhm.
planting it from seed, you want to plant it 3 months, on day one, and then maybe a month later so that you have a continuous crop and you don't harvest all of it. Let some of it go to flower so then it can self seed. But I think a
Mm.
lot of people think that they have black thumbs, as you mentioned earlier,
Yes.
because their coriander is not like other herbs and doesn't seem to last the whole season. It
Yeah.
is a quick growing crop. I think
Mm.
we loves the heat, so the heat is certainly not a problem. I think the
Okay.
rain, sometimes when we're having a lot of rain, it's like, oh, unless it
Mm.
has very good, well draining soil. So you mentioned soil about last week, good soil so that the roots don't sit in water. It literally just wants to produce for you. It wants to give you those delicious leaves that you can use all the time. But it's saying at the same time, hey, just leave me a little bit of a time so I can get some flowers, seed again. And then
Yes.
I think the trick is to plant more continuously, not all the seeds at one time, and then you'll have
Mhm.
a long crop. But don't think
Mm.
your coriander, which you planted in September or August, is going to keep on going all the way up until May, June.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a continually planting crop.
Mm.
I hope that
And
helps.
speaking of, so absolutely, you said something so important. You said it wants to do stuff, it wants to grow. And that's the thing, plants want to grow. So they're not fighting you.
No,
Gardening is easier when you realize they're not fighting you. Like,
and
no, I don't want
they're
you. Leave me
resilient.
alone.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh,
They're
and
resilient.
yes. Now, coriander, there's a little secret to growing coriander that I discovered because my coriander years back, I'd throw the coriander seeds, throw the dania seeds into the ground, and they would like do nothing because they'd rot. And then I discovered put your coriander seeds on a chopping board, take a rolling pin, and gently roll it over to the seed cracks, and then plant it. Hey presto, makes all of the difference.
So it
It,
could be the reason that you're doing that is to break the outer seed coat, which
yes,
actually then
yes.
also speeds up the process. Because then the
Uh-huh.
little radical, the roots that are going to start growing from that seed, they're like, oh, this is so easy. Look, it's already broken for me. Let's go for it.
Yes,
So I love that
yes.
idea.
Yeah. And I've also discovered that you can grow coriander without soil. If you just take a colander, a kitchen colander, and you take some kitchen paper, towels, and lay it in the kitchen colander, then put your seeds on the board, crack them open, and lay those seeds on the paper. And then just keep that paper damp. They actually germinate and they grow almost like microgreens. So you can have your coriander in a colander, your dania in your colander, on your kitchen sink, on your kitchen windowsill where there's sun, and then as you're cutting, just you know put another colander out, and you can, when the one is dying, start growing the next, and you always have fresh dania at home because it is something that is widely used, especially here in Durban.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
Yeah.
important also because when you start bringing herbs into your home and growing them there, it's something that you could have, for us in Gauteng, we can't grow coriander in winter. It would die because of our cold.
Mhm.
So if we could bring
Yes.
it into the warmth of our kitchen in your colander, it's a bit of a tongue twister so early on the
Coriander in
Sunday
the
morning.
colander.
Yeah.
Coriander in the colander.
I did that with basil. So I grew, instead of having a cool drink in my glass, I grew some basil in my glass and I put it on my kitchen windowsill. And I do have it in my garden outside. But I like the fact that it was just there in my kitchen. I could break off a leaf. It's rooted beautifully in water, like you were
Mm.
saying with the lettuce, which would also root wonderfully in water. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh, this adds a whole new concept to growing, is growing plants that grow on your kitchen windowsill with water rather than, as you said, with soil or like the
Mm.
coriander you mentioned, putting it in the paper.
Yeah, and that's so true. And it is part of showing children how things are grown. It is part of just starting a little gardening experience in your home. Growing things in water, I find, people sometimes bring home, not sometimes, we all bring home vegetables at some point in time in the week. And onions, for instance, onions can be really, really strong for kids as well as for older people. It can be just strong. It can kind of be hard on the digestion if people have acid reflux. And so, what I did when my folks were out here is I put the onion into a glass, the same as you would do with an avocado pip. Put
Yeah.
the onion into a glass with the toothpicks to hold it in place and let the water just touch the bum of the onion and it begins to shoot those green leaves. And now you have spring onions, which are
Nice.
much milder. It's not really a spring onion, but it's the same kind of flavor that you've got. It's milder. You can still use it in a salad. You can still use it for cooking, and it keeps on giving. And if you cut it, as you cut it, it grows. As long as you don't cut it too close to the onion surface, it keeps growing. So you can grow stuff in water. You can root stuff in water. If you bring home, like, what kind of things are your favorite to root in water, Cary?
Oh, I'm trying because my friend, she manages to do it all the time in her house. Instead of having vases of flowers, she has vases of lavender that she's cut from her own garden and she's trying to root in water. And then she has pelargoniums that are all over the place that she's also rooting. And it looks like her house is filled with vases of flowers. And yet it's actually all these plants that she's trying to root in water. So I'm trying with a few more, slightly more difficult plants because I can't find the actual plant. So, when you were talking about learning from your grandparents right at the beginning of the show, it's these old plants that you see around, but they are so big, like
Mm.
bohemia, which is that lovely indigenous plant with the orange flowers that I'm sure you've seen on all the pavements at the moment. I'm trying to reach one of those. I'm trying to reach my mom said to me yesterday, it's called a bella perone, which is the shrimp plant. And
Okay.
it's because I can't find one. I can see them everywhere in people's gardens and they're beautiful big plants, but I can't get one to buy to put in my own garden. So I'm trying to root it in water in a vase. And actually, so sadly, the lady who helps me in the house, she saw these plants and the flowers were dying a little bit. And she went and threw it in the dustbin. I was like, no, no, no. I quickly had to go and rescue all my, say, cuttings because they don't always look good. I haven't got
Mm.
that where my like my friends, they look beautiful, maybe because I'm not trying lavender and pelargoniums, but
Mm.
hers look beautiful. Mine look like I'm trying to grow plants I'm rescuing plants, but I still enjoy
Okay.
it. And if you have patience and keep the water clean, actually, I'm so
Yes.
excited when I see this little root growing, but it's taken maybe for those two plants, because they're quite woody stems, it took
Mhm.
about 6 weeks. Whereas my
Mhm.
basil, when I tried it for the first time, it like rooted within 4 or 5 days. I'm like, whoa, I am a green fingered person. What a bonus.
You got green thumb.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
I have found that there are things that you can add to water to speed things up. Things like a little bit of honey, sometimes a little bit of coffee, actually, and sometimes a little bit of sugar. It actually helps those things to root faster, those little clippings. And I found also with my clippings, I don't know if you've discovered this, if you've got a little slip of lavender from someone, try to get it green, yes, but also try to get where there's like a V connection, a Y connection, shall we say. So there's a main stem and then there's one little going. But there's another message that has come in over here that I quickly want to read. A listener listening to us, and she says, Assalamu alaikum, I have successfully germinated my lychee seeds. So, wa alaikum salam. They are a month old in my pot, and there are a few of them in my pot. When do I transport them into single pots as I live in a flat? So she's growing
Wow.
lychees in a pot in a flat. Now, yes, you're
Amazing.
going to need a big pot for your lychees because it's a
Yeah.
big tree. You need a big pot. But yeah, when would she transport them, in your opinion?
So, in a growing point of view, we normally say at a 4 leaf stage. So, when you've got 4 leaves coming from the stem, or if we work on 10 to 15 centimeters tall, then you would transport them. And I would almost say maybe not exactly into the final pot, but
Yes.
into, lychees, a nice taproot. So they want a tall, slim pot. So actually, it might be worth recycling a water bottle or
Mm,
upcycling one of those type of things and putting a few holes in it, obviously, so that there is drainage. And then you want to plant it into that. So maybe plant it into a few 1.5 liter or 2 liter water bottles first. And it's probably 25, 30 centimeters. Then you could go and plant it into your, say, final pot. But
mm.
just make sure
Yeah,
you use good potting soil or something like that when you're planting it out.
there you go. There you go. So you're going to pot it on. And for the listeners who are newbies and saying, what does she mean by a taproot? Think carrot. Think
Yes.
carrot. Some plants have this carrot and the roots come out from the sides, and other plants have, what are they, assiduous? What do they call them? When they're not
Um,
taproots, they
fibrous roots.
there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
And they extend outwards like furry hairs or mops. Okay, we've got another comment that came in from Sister Fatima Effendi. Says, my dad had a guava, lemon, grape trees, and of course his Christmas flowers. He loved gardening, a fig tree too, and my mom made fig jam. How wonderful is that? So let's go to where people are trying to get started. They know they have a black thumb, and they are lazy gardeners, perhaps. So, not a lot of time. It's not, oh, no, no, I need to start gardening, and that's going to be a disciplined thing, and I have to, discipline myself. What would you suggest?
I really think it all starts with good soil. So your speaker that you had last week, make sure you're using good compost if it's in your garden, good potting soil, and go and visit your local garden center or chat to. I love garden clubs. Garden a wealth
Mhm.
of information, and actually even to your grandparents, because they will say to you, you know, this is what I started with your previous listener, like with the guava tree. We're not allowed to sell guava trees anymore because they're on the invasive species list. They
Oh,
are beautiful. Yeah. So you have to almost so grow them in your own garden or get them from a friend. But it's I think it's speaking to people. Gardening is all about sharing. And so if you
yeah,
start with the good roots, a good foundation, as I say, a good healthy soil, and then at school we all learn to plant beans. But actually beans are quite hard to get to grow. And I love growing the microgreens that you spoke about earlier, because for anybody that gives quick results. You plant those
mm,
seeds, whether you're sprinkling them in soil, whether you're sprinkling them onto some paper towel, they grow within 4 days. So
yeah,
it gives you that, wonderful idea that I've got it. I've got green thumbs. And I was speaking at a garden club last week, and I was saying, sometimes when you give people a present, you give them something that might be a little bit hard, maybe like an orchid. An orchid is
yeah,
probably not the easiest plant to grow. So
yeah.
try and when you're giving presents as plants or ideas, even lemon trees. Lemon trees are lovely. A lot of people give them as their first, housewarming gift and that sort of thing. But some
Mm,
lemon trees are quite susceptible to fungus and disease, and
mm,
especially if you don't feed it. And then people think, oh no, my lemon tree's not doing really well. But go then speak to, as I say, the elders because they know, or your local
yes.
garden center and get help. But also, I think when you sharing your information about plants, give. I had one friend, and she always used to give a hebe as a gift. It's very
Okay.
hardy. It's got beautiful soft flowers, attracts a lot of pollinators to your garden, but it is super hard to kill. So when she was giving it as a gift or something like that, it meant that people would have success. And I
Yeah.
think that's what, when you're successful with something, you think, oh, I can conquer the world. I can grow anything. And I think that's what we want to try and encourage when we starting off is, don't start off
Yes.
with a hard plant. Start off with your basil and your veggies. Veggies grow
Mm,
so well. Your spinaches, your tomatoes. Your tomatoes grow in compost heaps. And when you have your
yeah.
first tomato that you've tasted from your own garden, it just tastes super sweet and almost sun-kissed. And you're like, oh, why didn't I do this earlier? So
And you realize that your shop bought tomatoes taste like water or nothing. Yes.
exactly. So start
Yeah.
off with easier plants. I always find that trying to grow, because I don't have patience, growing my broccoli and my cabbages. Oh my goodness gracious, they take so long, and I'm trying to turn them into decorations now, so I don't, go and check on them all the time because they just
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
seem right straight away. So I like the faster growing crops, which make my pots
Mm.
look amazing. My mints, as we spoke about earlier, the coriander, that just keeps coming up and giving me endless joy with very little effort.
Mint can actually be a bit of a nightmare because it just grows everywhere. It spreads everywhere. Sometimes it feels a bit like a verbena that just won't go away because it just really does spread. But these 2-week plants, 2 weeks to harvest, lettuce. 2 weeks, you've got
Yes.
lettuce that you can actually make a little bit of a salad. And you don't need to. The other thing is, folks, if you're growing lettuce and you've decided that that's what you want to start with, because that's like dead easy, don't yank the whole thing out of the plant. Just cut off some of the outer leaves and keep
Yes.
using that plant. One of our listeners says, I am rooting a pineapple. Now I've got quite a few pineapple plants. They are dead easy to grow, but they are slow. And at the moment, I have 3 pineapples actually growing full, and it takes about 5 years for the sister that is rooting a pineapple. It takes about 5 years for that pineapple plant to bear fruit. But it's so easy. You get a pineapple from the shop, grab that crown at the base, twist and pull, and then just remove those lower leaves by pulling them down. And you'll see little bumps. So leave a space about 4 or 5 centimeters if it's big enough, that crown, and then put it into that glass of water sitting on the windowsill. I'll have them in water like that for months on end until those roots are nice and big, and then stick them outside, throw them in a pot, and they grow. And something I'd read about pineapples was that you can grow a pineapple and then it's only going to bear fruit once and that's it. And I thought, no, that's not what happens with mine. Mine basically, we every year we're getting fruit. But let's get back to our ad break. We have a little ad break at the moment, and we'll be right back after this. So don't go away. You're with Green Thumbs Up, and we're talking back to gardening. I am Rabia Carvalho, and I am speaking to Dr. Cary Goodwin, who is our gardening expert and a regular on Green Thumbs Up. And we are talking about back to gardening, and that is essentially if you were to start from scratch, what do you do? Now, Dr. Cary, you'd mentioned, Dr. Cary. I always call you Dr. Cary, I know. You always say, um, so we're talking about if you were to start over, you mentioned the importance of soil, having good potting soil, having good compost. Kind of people may say, and they do say to me on gardening groups often, but how do I mix it together? Is it like a whole lot of compost and a little bit of soil? Do I put potting soil and then just sprinkle some compost on top? Give us your best tips for that.
Okay, so for me, when I started my garden from scratch, because it was a lot of soil and rocks and clay, and I started making my flower beds, I actually went and dug down, well, with help, because it was very heavy, and a lot of hard work. I dug down at least 60 centimeters, and I took all that soil and I put it onto my grass. So I had these lovely flower beds or lovely trenches, and then I started filling them with organic matter. So I searched the neighborhood for old twigs and branches and all sorts of things that would eventually break down, but they would give my soil and my compost a lot of aeration. They would provide breathing holes for the earthworms to come and seed. They would provide, because they'd been chopped down, they would provide bacteria and space for fungus to grow. So I put like at least maybe a 10-centimeter layer of all these broken sticks and branches. Then I started putting some leaves. Some people like to put newspaper. I'm not a really big fan of newspaper. I like to use more organic matter. So I put a lot more. At the time we had a lot of organic waste, like foliage. I think it was autumn. So I did collect from the neighborhood. I hated seeing all those bags of leaves that people put in. Don't put your leaves into bags. It's like pure gold that you're just throwing away. So I collected all of that and I filled it up. And so I had a really good base of stuff that would eventually break down. I do use my organic waste from my kitchen. So I had quite a lot of bokashi and pips and peels and all sorts of things. And I put that down at least the bottom 20 centimeters, where all this stuff that I found around the neighborhood that was living and now is not living anymore. So all organic waste. Then I started mixing my compost. So I mix 1 bag of compost with 1 bag of soil, equivalents. And then I started putting that into my holes. And then I do like adding, so I added some like organic rock dust, because I don't think our soil has a lot of trace elements in it anymore. I added some fertilizers that you find at your local garden centers, just so that the soil, because compost is just organic matter, but it might miss the essential nutrients that your plants need to thrive. So as I said, I did go and add, whether it be bone meal or superphosphate, or there's a lovely one now that's called BioRock. I added some of that in just to make my soil healthy from the start. And then I filled it all the way up. And I always think my poor neighbors, because I often had to do it at night, I think they thought I was burying bodies in my garden because I was out there with my torch, digging the soil and mixing in the compost. I could never do it during the day because that's when I'm working. And I, you used to look over the wall and I'd be like, no, no, don't worry, I'm just creating a garden. And then about 3 months later, when I had planted everything, he would look over the wall and he was like, oh, wow, your garden is beautiful. And it was because I
Yes.
spent probably the first 2 or 3 weeks just preparing the soil. So that's if you were
Yeah.
doing it in a garden bed. With a potting soil like pots today, actually, our potting soil is so magnificent. The ones that you find in most of your, as I say, garden centers, it's got coir fibers
Mhm.
in to help hold on to water. It's got little water saving granules. It's sifted a little bit, so it makes it easy. So, for a pot, I actually just take potting soil. Maybe if it's a plant that needs good drainage, I would put a bit of layer of stones at the bottom of my pot. But otherwise, then I plant directly into potting soil and it works magnificently for me. So those are the two things. But it's really good to,
Perfect.
as I say, start with a really good foundation.
Yes, yes. And if you do have a little bit more space, maybe you've got, 1 by 1, even 1 meter by 1 meter, get yourself a little bag. I find to get a bag, one of these old, bags that the potatoes come in, the woven bags essentially. And into that, you can have some potting soil, you can put a little bit of compost, but then throw in those eggshells, throw
Mm,
in those grounds, not necessarily all of the kitchen waste because we're not making compost, but we're making a very, very rich soil. So, if you've got chickens, take a little bit of that, not too much because it can burn plants, but take some of that and throw that in that bag and keep that bag as just an ongoing nutrient
yeah.
powerhouse that you can
Mm.
throw. But now we've received a little poem, don't you
Oh,
know?
nice. I like it.
And I thought I'd read it to us all because it's actually really pretty. And it's called The Gardener by Uli K. And so it says, so I shall bloom then, even even with these grieving hands, my heart half full and half empty, carried by the wind, warmed by the sun, drenched in rain, buried in soil, broken in my waiting, trampled underfoot, storm on the horizon, and yet here I am still standing. And not because I am brave, not because I am strong, not because of anything that I have done. I am small against these breezes after all. My fragile petals would not stand a chance, but I was planted here to grow. And when the gardener comes along, I want to say with a happy heart, I bloomed because you loved me. How
Oh,
beautiful is that?
amazing.
I
And so,
bloomed because you loved me. And that's what it is. They want to grow for us.
mm, yeah, I think at this garden club talk, I said to the people there, I said, why do you love gardening? And they said, gardening, one of the answers was because it's a surprise. Because you don't always know what's going to happen. You don't know if that coriander seed is going to germinate. You know, you're not sure if you've planted that bulb and you've forgotten about it 6 months later, and then you go outside and it's this beautiful surprise because, as the poem said, you loved them. You gave them the tender, loving
Yes,
care. You gave them maybe
yes,
the right soil and a bit of the right conditions, and they
yes.
just bloomed magnificently. I mean, oh, I love it.
Just before we started the show, I had a few minutes with our previous host of the previous show, the breakfast show, and Buddy Govind and I were saying how he was saying that talking to the plants is a lovely thing, to be able to talk to plants and to be able to just experience them. And it is so true. It's that moment of mindfulness. Our mind is racing with everything, and our brain cannot do more than one thing. As much as we multitask, um, in terms of focus. So when you are looking at that plant, you're practicing a space of mindful living. You're experiencing that. And if you're speaking to the plant, I heard somewhere, read somewhere, that the reason they love it is not just because of the energy of loving and that they receive, but also because of the carbon dioxide that comes out of our mouth. And they love that because they breathe that all day.
Like
So
that
that's
too.
That's the practical reason. So gardening and exercise in surprise and
Mhm.
exercise in faith. I heard also read a while ago, somebody said it was one of these Chinese philosophers who said that gardening is the expression of faith because you don't know if it's going to live
Yeah.
or grow or die. So we have a message that has come in here. My lemon tree has fungus now. I do
Oh,
spray it with vinegar water. I wouldn't suggest that, but she says I do spray it with vinegar water, but not working. Can you help? So first, I'd say stop the vinegar water because vinegar kills plants.
yes. Yeah. Don't use the vinegar water. So the reason that the lemon trees would start having a fungus now, it's called a woolly. It actually starts off with woolly aphids. So
Mhm,
normally, if you looked on your lemon tree, you would probably see a few ants crawling up and down the stem. And if you looked
mhm,
on the underside of the leaves and you felt it, they would feel a little bit sticky. And so
mm,
these aphids, especially now when it's starting to flower and there's lots of fresh fruits on your, I mean, fresh shoots on your lemon tree, the aphids are like, this is a lovely
mm.
place for me to be. And they
Yeah.
secrete a honeydew substance, which then attracts the fungus, which is the sooty mold that comes from, and as I said, normally sits on the underside of the leaves. So we would treat for aphids rather than for fungus, because if you can get rid of the aphids, then the mold or the fungus will actually disappear. So I
Mhm,
like using, we use in the garden center, we use more commercial products, but like a Ludwig's
mhm,
insect spray or a Bioneem, those type of products. And you just spray your lemon tree with that. They're non-toxic, they're organic.
mhm.
Obviously, they will kill the aphids. And that would work really, really nicely to try and get rid of them. And then your lemon tree, and then always feed your lemon tree. I'm a big
Yeah.
believer in if you have a healthy plant, the disease, whether it be insect or fungus, would be less. The plant is
Can't say.
resilient to fight against it.
That's great advice. Thank you for that. Absolutely. I want to also give you and this listener a recipe that
Yeah.
is completely inexpensive compared to something like Bioneem, which can be expensive, and it works
Yes.
absolutely just as well. And that's 2 tablespoons of neem oil. You want 2 tablespoons of neem oil. You want 2 tablespoons of dishwash liquid, a good strong one like your MAC or your Sunlight. And then you want 2 liters of water. Throw those all together and give it a good shake. But now the trick is put the bottle down after shaking it and look at it. It should be a see-through bottle so that you can see, count to 10. 1, 2, 3. And as you're counting, if you see the oil rising to the surface, depending on the dishwash liquid that you've used, you may need another tablespoon of dishwash liquid. If you've counted to 10 and there's no oil on the surface, you're good to go. You can keep that in your garden, in your shed, wherever. You could make it and sell it if you wanted to. And it's a wonderful fungicide, insecticide. And instead of vinegar water, if you're wanting to address the fungus itself, what I find works is to take 3% peroxide and mix your 3% peroxide with water 1 to 1 rather than vinegar. Vinegar, you would throw, for instance, vinegar or vinegar water onto weeds in the driveway and that'll kill them. So that's what it's going to do to your plants as well. So, Dr. Cary
Yeah.
Goodwin who has been with us today. And Cary, I cannot believe the time has flown. And we
It
must
always goes
continue.
so
It
fast.
always does. Time flies when you're having fun. Good friends on
Absolutely.
the show.
Yeah.
And so, thank you so much for being with
Thank you.
us today. And we will speak with you again very, very soon, I am sure. Uh, Dr. Cary Goodwin is with us, folks, approximately every 6 weeks. So, if you're picking up a cycle, that's the cycle that we have her on here. So, thank you so very much for giving us your time and your advice and your experience and your knowledge. Always wonderful, wonderful having you with
Thank
us.
you so
Thank you.
much.
And we'll speak
Enjoy.
again.